Welcome to the Friendly Meeples Lounge, the podcast all about board games, new and old, weird and fun, and our thoughts and feelings on their playability. I'm your host, Jen Florez.
And I'm your host, Chris Ingold.
And today we are doing our last episode of the year. So this will be our last episode of technically season 1 of the Friendly Meeples Lounge. And I don't believe we're already at the end of the year and have released so many episodes.
When was episode 1?
I'm pretty sure it was March.
That sounds about right.
It would have been actually earlier because remember we were recording at BunnyCon and we'd already released a few episodes at BunnyCon.
I know we started planning the podcast around about now, last year.
We might have actually been doing a whole year, Chris.
Watch out for the first birthday episode at some point in the new year, once we've worked out when that is, because memories are a bit addled. It's December and everything. We've all got Christmas brains. But we'll work out for that at that point. But no, it's just this year has disappeared.
I know. I think from this time last year to now, like my life has changed significantly. Like it's nuts to think since we did the first episode, how much has changed. Actually, in both of our personal lives as well. Like a huge amount's changed for both of us, hasn't it?
It's changed, and then it's changed again. And then after that, it's changed again, and then it's changed again. I think it's been one of those years. I think it has been for a lot of people because so many things have been, I think, kind of catching up. It's almost like the world stopped for a couple of years during the pandemic, and somehow all the change that didn't happen during the pandemic has sort of accelerated to try and get back to where it was. And that's sometimes fun, and sometimes it's less fun because you're sort of like running around trying to cope with what life throws at you, and it throws you a good ball and then it throws you a duff ball, and you're like thinking, well, you could have spread them out a little bit more. But I think the one thing that has been fabulous this year has been board games. Despite some of the shipping challenges that still exist, we have had a great year in board games, which is great because that means we get to have a happy podcast because our podcast is about board games.
And look, this time we are doing a bit of a special episode where Chris and I are going to go through our top 10 new games of this year. We actually just discovered, having a bit of a chat, we actually approached it a little bit differently. So I thought we were doing the top 10 games we discovered this year. And Chris thought that we were doing the top 10 games that were released this year.
So I've done the top 10 games that were released this year, but there's pretty big overlap with the top 10 games I've discovered this year as well. So I think there would be, I think probably a couple of honourable mentions that would have slipped in for older games that I played this year and decided, ooh, I like that. Because there have been a couple of those, and there should be in any year that you're playing. But there's been a lot of great new games this year as well. The one thing that we did note in that is that doing any top 10 for the year, and this is where I think Jen's approach might actually have been a little bit fairer, is that there are some poor games that are 2023 games that are not going to hit the lists. I can think of one in particular, and it could be great. Might not be great. It might be really average, but I know where it is. It's sat in Etherworks warehouse, and it ain't going to leave Etherworks warehouse until past Christmas, I don't think. So it's a 2023 game, but I won't play it. And likewise, there's the games that maybe have only just landed, or the game that is on the shelf but you haven't been able to play yet. So I know one game that I think is top 10 candidate for a lot of people from 2023 is SkyTeam. SkyTeam's in my cupboard. I've not played it yet. I've not played it in any way. You have to sit down and actually play the game to be able to appreciate if it's any good. And I've not had that opportunity. I may well have that opportunity over the next few days. But for now, when we're recording this podcast, SkyTeam, unfortunately, I'm sorry. I'm sure it should be in there. It probably will make it in there from everything I've heard about it. But it's not in my list because I haven't played it yet.
Do you know, I actually remember at the start of the year as well, probably our very first episode, I was talking about how I've got the huge everything box of Everdell, and my goal was to play Everdell with all the expansions this year. Haven't done it. Absolutely have not done it. Haven't had time. Haven't had table space. Just I think the goals we start the year with, the things we grab, sometimes we get so excited about a game and we're just like, oh my God, I definitely want to play that, but I'm just going to go do this thing first. And yeah, sometimes it just slips away.
Jen, no, hold on. Roll back a bit. I believe you are the only person that I know with table space to actually play Everdell with all the expansions. Have you actually tried it and realised that even your table can't fit it?
No. I haven't even gotten the whole thing out of the box at the same time, other than for when Rod was putting all the stickers on the meeples. We actually, look, to be fair, we did have some friends coming over a couple of weeks ago where our aim was we were going to play Everdell with all of the expansions. And this was right after MeepleCon. And I was so tired and Rod was super tired. And we'd borrowed Apiary from Francois so that we could have a go at playing Apiary. And Rod was like, oh, why don't we play Apiary first and then we can play Everdell? And by the time we got done playing Apiary, I was like, guys, I'm exhausted. Like, learning new games for me can be quite exhausting, especially when I'm already tired because we've just finished running a 3-day convention. Yeah, nah. But I know it does fit on my table. I know it does because even with the expansions and stuff that we had before, it fits sideways on my table. So the fact that the new expansions go up and down, I mean, it's 1.2 by 2.4 meters. It's huge. So I'm sure we have room for it. We just need to actually get around to playing it.
I had a weird kind of visual pop in my head earlier when discussing table size. Thinking many of us struggle with the amount of space that games take out. Jen's lucky that she's got an absolutely enormous table. But one of the things I remember from the olden days, and I don't know how much this is a thing these days, but my dad was really obsessed with like model railways. And he had a small one sort of set up, but there are other people obsessed with model railways who had these great big massive tables with beautiful kind of forests and woodland and model houses and everything set up, and this little like trains that they then switch on and they whiz around the tracks and go around in circles. But the beauty of the thing was actually this big model of this landscape. And actually, I could imagine Everdell being the game rather than like, you've got all the train games. You'd think they would be the obvious candidates, but actually Everdell would be the perfect game to have integrated into a massive like model diorama. You take one of those like model railway tables, actually put a little like meeple carrying train on it to carry your meeples around from like worker placement spot to worker placement spot and just build the whole thing. That's this big diorama and have like kind of and then you could all sit in different places. And what would be really cool is because it's quite hard to lean over a big table, is actually then you could add more expansions to Everdell because you just say, I want to put my worker over there. And you just stick them in the train, press a button, and you send them off to the station so you can get like a little lever to take them out and put them on the spot. That would be cool. Now, I don't know why that popped into my head.
What's actually really funny is when I was little, my grandpa and I built an N-gauge model railway set, and that's how I got into building landscapes and things, and why I'm so good at building, like all the, oh my God, what's it called? Blood Bowl, Warhammer. I used to make all the Warhammer landscapes and stuff for my brothers when they were playing. And I used to love painting the models and love making the landscapes. Not as big on playing Warhammer, but we had a model railway set that was literally, it was this big U shape, and he built it in the back of his shed. Now, his shed was half the size of my house, and having been to my house, you know how big that is because it was a big rural property. So our model railway was this big U shape that was 3 meters by 1.5 meters, and then another 3 meters by 1.5 meters, and the same size at the back. So it literally took up easily 4 by 4 meters of floor. No, it would have been more than that. The room that it was in, because we created a little room inside the shed, was almost the same size as my board game room. It was huge. Like this, it was absolutely huge. And because we had the door in the middle, it went all the way around the walls on every single side. And we had landscape everywhere, and he bought all these little N-gauge models from the UK that were like different train stations from different cities. Like he had a replica of the Harrogate train station in the middle of our little diorama, and we had Big Ben and we had the London Bridge. We had all sorts of really amazing things in this landscape. It literally looked like, there was a little city in one spot that had all these little buildings and stuff that are famous from London, and then a whole bunch of countryside it was like he was building this memory of having lived in England with me when I was little, and I loved making it. And I'm now going, God damn it, I wish we still had that, because I could turn it into the most epic Everdell or Ticket to Ride ever. That would have been so cool.
Ticket to Ride feels like the obvious candidate for something like that, but it's just not, because if you're being authentic, if you're on Ticket to Ride, you'd press the thing for your train to start and it would stop because the track's not been built yet. At the end of it, you could basically sit there and go, right, who reaches a destination or who falls over a cliff from an unfinished train track, a la sort of Back to the Future 3. Which is obviously how Ticket to Ride Legacy is going to end.
You could have done it, actually, because we had something like 30, almost 40 train stations on this map, or on this big diorama. So you probably could. Oh my goodness. I'm really bummed now that we sold it. Damn it.
I guess we better plow in. Have you got any honorary mentions? Is there anything that's not hit your top 10 that you feel needs to be called out, mentioned from the year?
Anything that's not hit my top 10 that I want to call out? Not that I can really think of, because all the ones that I sort of have called out are new games that I've played this year. Actually, yes. Oh my God, I can't remember what it's called. Is it Kitsendo?
Kitsendo. Is that that's that kind of like Battle Royale card game with the beautiful foxes that was at the Meeple Market as well?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Kitsendo. I think that's how it's pronounced, yeah.
Kitsendo. Yeah, absolutely, because it's so pretty. It's the artwork in it is beautiful, and it almost made my top 10, but yeah, I left it out only because I had to narrow it down to 10, but definitely I would say honorable mention, beautiful game, beautifully packaged, really interesting mechanics, like mechanics I haven't really come across before. So yes, honorable mention Kitsuendo. How about you?
There's a couple of games which have arrived or are about to arrive this year, which could be great, but I don't know, as I said. So one of those is the Fox Experiment, which is the new game from Elizabeth Hargraves, and I forget the name of the other designer at the moment. Apologies to him. But that is based on some old fox breeding experiment from the 1950s, and is basically a cross between a sort of strategy game, not really a worker placement game, a sort of an engine building game, and a roll and write. It's not really a roll and write, but it also is a roll and write because you're writing on the cards and you're rolling great big handfuls of dice. The only reason I've not played that yet is because it is pretty obvious that that's a game that is going to be better at higher player counts. So I expect I'll have it in the bag on Boxing Day, Jen, when we touch play games on Boxing Day, but it hasn't been played yet. Another game that's really interesting, which is the one that I'm waiting to see when it'll ship from Etherworks, is called Mythwind. And Mythwind is definitely intriguing. It will either be a complete damp squib, or it'll be something very special, because it's a game that doesn't end. It's a cooperative game like Animal Crossing or so on. You can apparently just set it up, have another go, where you build up your town, you build up all your things, you're building up all of these different things within your community, and you've got all these different roles, and then you get to a point where you've made some progress and you put it away again. And you take it out again and carry on, and you put it away again. It's a game with no win condition, no end, apparently. I think they must run out of content at some point. Flexible, you just grow and you get various different things that make you happy. Now that is interesting. Send out a board game where there is no end to it and no winning, and you just play and then put it away, and then you get it out again and play some more and put it away. I'm intrigued by that, because
I'm intrigued.
It's like that. It's a brave thing. How do you make that work? The interesting thing is, if he does make it work, then that is going to be something quite phenomenal, because that might then spin off a whole new direction for where board games can go. So that's designed by Brendan McCaskill, who did do the Gloomhaven and space game Stars of Aquarius, which now that apparently was a little bit overblown from what I've heard about it, but I've not played it. It's just a bit overcomplicated, so I'm hoping this is more streamlined, but I'm really interested in that one. And then, as I said, Sky Team's an honorary mention because I haven't got to play it yet. And Hegemony, or Hegemony, depending how you say it, the big politics game.
That didn't make your top 10?
No, that's only not made my top 10. So there's a couple of games which were in contention for my top 10 that I've played solo, but I haven't yet had the opportunity to play multiplayer. One of them, bit reveal, has made my top 10 because in playing it solo, A, I really, really enjoyed it that much, and B, I thought I'm going to absolutely adore this multiplayer. I think it's lower on my top 10 than it would have been if I'd have played it multiplayer, but I just don't know yet. Hegemony, I want to reserve judgment because having played it solo, it is quite a massive overhead to do that. I can see the game that's hidden within there, but I can't fully appreciate what it would be like. Whereas I think with the other game that I'm going to add into my top 10, I think I can.
Actually, there's one other one that I want to say is an honourable mention that I really enjoy, but wouldn't quite make my top 10, and that's Project L, which you taught me at BunnyCon. Definitely, I was like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of cool. Like, it's a really cool game that I love getting out and playing because it's a good warm-up game, but didn't quite make my top 10.
See, of course, you discovered Project L this year. Project L, it was from the year before, I think, or was it even earlier? But if Project L had been in contention for my top 10, if it had been a game of 2023, it would have been way up my list. Project L is wonderful. So it's absolutely fantastic. That's an evergreen. I'm waiting. In fact, I think another thing that's in shipping at the moment is the latest mini expansion to Project L, and finally the big box, or the big half a box, because they've got a big box deluxe storage solution for Project L, but it's not a big box. It's a big half a box because you reuse your existing lid. Look at that for. So that's interesting.
Well, that's cool.
Right. Should we go?
Do you know one that I want to actually give one more honourable mention is this year they released a fan art version of some of the cards in Wingspan. And if you haven't seen the fan art cards for Wingspan, find a friend who's got a copy of it. They're absolutely beautiful. We haven't put it in our game because you have to actually go through the game and find those birds and replace the cards, because otherwise you've got two copies. But it's a really lovely look. If you're still looking for a Christmas gift for someone who loves Wingspan, try your hardest to find the fan art box because it's really beautiful. And some of the fan art is a little bit cute and kitschy. Like it's very obviously kids that have drawn it, and they just thought it was really sweet that kids have sent their art in. But most of it is just this absolutely incredibly beautiful fan art. So not really a game, but an expansion to a game. Definitely try and find a copy. It's beautiful if you love Wingspan.
I've seen just a few pictures of some of the art, and for that reason, the reason that it involves resorting through your cards, and you've got to decide, well, what are you going to keep in your game? You're going to keep the fan art, and it's like, ooh, I like this piece of fan art, but I prefer this piece of original art. There's no way I know that I'm ever going to do that. But I would love to have a look at it, Jen, when I get the chance, if you've got that, because I saw some of them and I thought, these are really nice. Yeah,
they're beautiful. They're really beautiful. All right, let's kick into it. And I reckon you should go first this time, because last time we did a top 5 list, I went first. So you get to go first this time, Chris.
Okay, so my number 10 of 2023 is a game that's been published by a local Australian publisher. It has been designed, I think, in Japan. And it's a game that encapsulates the true essence of what it is to be a ninja who is trying to go out and do their ninja-y things in an environment that is about as stable as a small road built over a number of Mexican sinkholes. It is Floating Floors. And Floating Floors is effectively a dexterity game or pathfinding game where you are trying to navigate your ninja across all these floating floors, which are cards that have been balanced on other cards, which in turn are on top of little wooden shapes. And you have to try and balance the weight of your ninja with the weight of the other shapes. But then you'll find that floors will rotate and other players will adjust the different floors and the different paths that are available, because everyone's trying to find their own little route to their own different destination. What's so great about floating floors, and I do love my dexterity games, but is that it's that kind of feeling of sort of calm, thoughtful, kind of ninja skills is there as you play it. So a lot of dexterity games, you'll sit there, you'll try and work out the logic of whether or not something's going to work. It's the maths. If I move this thing from A to B, is it going to fall over? And then there's, can I actually do it? Am I nimble enough? With floating floors, it is actually more thinky, because that whole thing about saying, right, what is the weight balance here? What is actually holding this card up? Because I can't quite see it anymore because there's a card on top of it. Can I remember what's underneath this if I turn this round and I shift the weight? Is it sat on a couple of triangles and it's just going to fall off? What's another player going to do? The thinking part of it is much more dominant than it is in a lot of other dexterity games, and it feels like the game it should be. It feels like a silly ninja game, and it is a silly ninja game. So floating floors is great fun. I've really enjoyed it every time I played it, sort of since I got my copy back in May this year, and that's my number 10.
I'm actually bummed I didn't think of that for my top 10, because that's one we had donated to the Melbourne Meeples Library by Guff Studios. So Stella and Tarrant from Guff Studios donated that for us to be able to play, and as a prize for MeepleCon as well from the raffle. And I did have a go at it and I really liked it. I think it's a very cute game for all the reasons you've said. Like it's a great little game. It's a good little thinking game. Easy to whip out when you've got a couple of people around. So good choice for number 10 for sure. So my number 10, I guess it's not actually a new game, but for me, it was a new game, which was the Exit Advent Calendar. And Rod and I have been playing it since the start of December. I actually bought it way earlier in the year, and it's not this year's Exit Advent Calendar. I'm pretty sure it was the first one they released, and I managed to find it at the game store that's in North Melbourne.
Spiel Deluxe?
Spiel Deluxe. Yes. I found it at Spiel Deluxe on sale and went, you know what? I've been wanting to try this game. So I grabbed it back in probably like June and was like, oh, I'm just going to play it whenever because it's last year's Advent Calendar or something. And we still hadn't played it by the 1st of December. So Rod was like, hey, babe, why don't we play Exit? So that's been really fun. Obviously, we haven't finished it yet. But I really like the fact that for the Advent Calendar, they've broken it down into these bite-sized chunks that maybe take sort of between 5 to 15 minutes each day. So it's a nice little amount to sort of get your brain thinking and moving and have something to do each day without having a huge, every single day you have to dedicate half an hour to this game and maybe you don't have half an hour. Like they're little snippets, but they have all the flavor of a normal Exit game without being so big. I think they're fantastic. So if you don't have one, go grab one from the board game store, and it's very easy to catch up to wherever we're at. And then on Christmas Day, you can open up the last one.
Did you say, Jen, that you were doing the Golden Book?
Do you know what's really bad is I don't actually remember the name of it. But it's the one that's got the mansion on the front, and that becomes quite key during the game as well. I don't want to give too much away.
That,
but it's
I think,
got
is the first one.
Drawing of, yeah. So it's really, yes, it is the Golden Book because you're looking for the book. And I don't want to give too much of the story away, but it's very, very good. And definitely, if you can find a copy of it, give it a go.
Yeah, I've played the Exit Advent Calendar games for the last 3 years, and I think we're 1 year behind Germany. So the Golden Book was last year's, not the first one. And last year's I think is not a cheat at all, because it's kind of December 2022, which is close enough. Right? It's valid, and you couldn't really do this year's. So I'm doing this year's at the moment, which is called the Silent Storm. I think the first year's was called the Ice Cave, and each one of them has had some brilliant puzzles. Each one of them has had something which is like, that was a great idea. It's a shame it didn't quite work. Where something's like, they've tried something a little bit too clever that maybe the consistency of high quality paper engineering wasn't enough to make it work in every single box. And there was one rather tricky manufacturing error in this year's, but I do remember last year's being really, really, really good. So one thing to be aware of if you get the Silent Storm one is that there were a couple of tricky issues with the first 2 boxes or the first 2 days. Since then, it's been brilliant.
We've had one puzzle so far that we're like, we really had to work it out. Like it seemed a little bit clunky and not quite in line with the rest of them. And it took us a little while, but because of the way the mechanics of the game works and you have to then line up where are you going to, it's very obvious to tell whether or not you've got the right solution. So I like that they've got that fail-safe in place where it gives you 2 different angles to get to the code and the door that you need to get to, so that you can definitely make sure everything is lined up correctly. Yeah. So if you grab a copy, you'll understand I'm trying so hard not to spoil it. But yeah, you'll understand if you get yourself a copy. It does give you multiple ways that you can make sure you have got the correct answer to the puzzle.
So, my number 9, I first played wearing a off-white coloured mask, and this was entirely appropriate.
I know exactly
with a
what
steely
it is.
face, looking sort of like straight ahead at the opposition. Tinkling in the background was some music on a Spotify playlist going do 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 do. It is, I say of course because everyone can know what I mean. Emerson Matsuuchi's board game version of Halloween, and this was a
really good
surprise because it's like, okay, at Halloween we release a board game based upon Halloween. It's a licensed board game based on a movie. It's probably going to be rubbish. It isn't. It's effectively like a lighter version of Skepterops. So, can I even say that? Specterops? Right. Specterops is Emerson Matsuuchi's slightly more involved hidden movement stealth spy espionage game. And Emerson Matsuuchi's currently working on, or I'm not sure where it is in the production process, but the board game version of Metal Gear Solid, which of course is the ultimate sort of stealth action video game.
Cool.
And so he's the best possible person to do effectively a stealth hidden movement game based on Halloween. It's in many ways a similar game, but it's simpler. It's taken a lot of the clunk out of it, so it's not a complicated game to learn at all, and it's incredibly thematic in that you basically have a map of the houses and the area around where the original film was set. You've got a bunch of cards with hidden stuff in it, piles of cards rather, and the inhabitants of the town, your Laurie Strode and her friends, are going around as survivors trying to find the things they need to do, which in this case is they need to rescue 2 kids, find at least 1 set of car keys, get into a car and get the hell out of there. And in that time, you're wandering around as Michael Myers with sort of hidden movement. The best mechanic in the whole game is that if one of the other players, if you run past so that they'd see you, you put some footprints down to show that they've seen you running past. But if one of the other players moves and they turn and face in the direction where they can see you, you just stick your Michael Myers figure exactly where it is. And that exactly replicates the feeling of Michael Myers just appearing randomly in the films when you're like kind of behind a hedge. So it's like you'll see kind of someone making a move like that, and then sometimes you'll appear and actually you're in a position where they can then bash you over the head with a baseball bat or whatever they've got in their inventory. As often as not, you might be a bit further away. Sometimes you'll be in a position where that means that you are then going to be able to bash them over the head with your Michael Myers knife or whatever it is. And Michael Myers is basically trying to get up a certain body count in order to win the game. or to make sure that the game drags on for long enough because they can't get what they need. The players have a number of characters, and they will have some of them die during the game. But as they swap them out, they'll then be able to get Dr. Loomis or the sheriff, who come in armed, so they can bring a little bit more firepower to the event. It's just a simple, lovely, easy to teach, lots of fun hidden movement game that actually feels like the film, and it's great fun. It's just like basically play the boogeyman or play all the people running away from the boogeyman. So that was a big surprise this year. I was amazed by how good it is. Halloween is my number 9.
That's a really good choice. I know that's definitely a game that I saw you playing and went, oh, I definitely want to play that. So I know Joe and I have had plans that we want to go see, was it one of The Exorcist? And Joe and I were like, oh my God, let's go see that. And of course, so many things have gotten in the way since now and then. But we definitely, I'm a big horror movie fan. And I know I look like, all I'd want to watch is rom-coms and, I'm fairly bubbly. So most people are like, oh, Shelby likes really bubbly, happy movies. I am a true crime and horror junkie. Give me blood, give me gore. I love all that kind of stuff. It's so bad. Definitely we need to play that one sometime. My number 9 is, which is really funny, completely the opposite. A game that's come out. This is not a new game, but it is a new version of it, and it is the light, bubbly, happy Disney Dixit. It's so pretty. It's so incredibly pretty. I love Dixit as a game because while it's quite an easy game, it's a really thinky game. And it's one where there's really good puzzles and stuff. Have you played Dixit, Chris? I'm sure you have.
No, I don't think I've ever actually played Dixit. I played Mysterium and sort of Dixit-esque games, but I don't think I've ever actually played just Dixit.
It's so cute. It's a really good, I think that Dixit's a really good introductory game if you're trying to play a game with people who've not played many board games before, because it's so open to interpretation. Basically, the mechanics of Dixit are everybody has this hand of beautiful art cards, and you have to pick a card from your hand, give a clue based on what that card has showing on it, and put it down in front of you. The Disney Dixit one, I know the original Dixit, it just has to be one word that you give as the clue, I believe. But Disney Dixit can be an entire phrase, which is, I think, really, really good. It makes it a bit more family friendly. And then everybody has to look at their hand and find a card that they think matches that as well, and put it in the pile. And then they all get shuffled up and divvied out, and you have to guess which was the original one. So it's a really great little game for very easy mechanics, not a lot to it, but it can prompt some very funny discussions, and everybody has a good laugh playing it. It's definitely, if you've not played it before, give it a go. Any version of Dixit is great. Actually, the original version of Dixit has many, many, many beautiful expansions with all sorts of gold foiling and things. And I have a sneaking suspicion, given the size of the Disney Dixit box and how many pieces actually come in it, they've got a lot of expansions planned, because there's a lot more space in the box for cards than the number of cards you actually get.
And how often is that the case?
Very rarely. Very, very rarely. So what's your number 8, Chris?
So my number 8 is, and I mentioned earlier, there was a one game that I had put on my list that I've managed to play solo, and I haven't yet managed to play multiplayer, but I enjoyed it so much, and I can feel where I think the multiplayer game is going to go, that I decided to put it on my list regardless. And so this is going to be my number 8. My gut is that when I've played this multiplayer, knowing myself and knowing the game, this is going to go up. So this is number 8, but potentially could have been in my top 5. And this is a recently received sort of Kickstarter game by a new Italian studio called Stranger Games Studios. And it's called Cabula. And Cabula is effectively, you are playing explorers or invaders from Earth who have landed on a magical land. It's sort of RPG style. You've got this map, like beautiful kind of mountains, hills, and you've got like spaces which link then to cities and so on. And you go questing, and you're going around, and in the middle of this thing is the Tree of Life that ensures that anyone who dies on the map will be reincarnated. And there is a guardian, which you pick from one selection of 6, to sit in the middle of this, who's guarding the Tree of Life. Now, as it is, you're trying to become stronger as you go through by finding encounters, by raiding dungeons, by kind of fighting or, in fact, taming some of the local monsters in the landscape until you become strong enough to be able to steal the Tree of Life, at which point when you try and steal the Tree of Life, no one gets reincarnated, and it's all of you versus the Guardian, all of you versus each other, and whoever ends up with the Tree of Life will eventually win. That last bit should hopefully emphasize the fact that in this game, you are not playing valiant, courageous explorers from Earth going into a sort of like corrupt and evil land. Actually, you're playing a bunch of assorted sort of morons and idiots from Earth who have landed in this magical land, which also has slightly moronic animals and guardians and so forth, and are really just trying to earn as many hashtags as possible and as many kind of like social media bump ups as possible. This is a silly, satirical, and funny take on your kind of like typical sort of board game RPG adventure, and it is very, very funny. In some cases, because the version I've got does have the packs, which are a little bit less suitable for work. In some cases, a little bit on the kind of eyebrow-raising side. So there is some content you'd want to filter out, depending who you're playing with. All of it is genuinely really funny. Some of it is almost like genuinely roll on the floor, kind of just stop everything, just laughing. You're just thinking, how did they come up with that? How did they think about that? Or that's just entertaining. And there's lots of content. All of the creatures are really funny. All of the powers that they have are really appropriate to those creatures. I'm in the middle of painting it at the moment, and I'm painting the Guardian that is effectively a horse that is a pyromaniac, but also is effectively modelled on like a sort of one of those butch Italians that collects cars and has a little bit of like a complex about being an alpha male, and so like wears like those kind of like white vests and like has like a little kind of like a gold medallion around his head. There's another Guardian that is a cross between a pig and a lion and the unicorn, and therefore has a pig's back and has a huge insecurity complex around it. You've got, I'm in the middle of painting like a sort of a hermit crab that lives inside a sort of recycled coffee cup and just representing kind of the litter that's strewn all over the landscape. It's full of wacky ideas, but it's actually really, really good. Everything in this game has been thought out with love, care, and attention. And one of the things that happened, they put it on Kickstarter and it failed the first time round, but they got a bunch of reviews, comments.
Really?
When they came back and put it on Kickstarter again, they'd gone back and taken all the reviewer comments and feedback that they got and incorporated it all into the game, designed to make it better. And even from that point, they were just thinking and thinking and thinking. And I'm really excited to see what Stranger Games Studios come up with next, because this is not your typical dungeon crawl game. It is not your typical, kind of wacky, hey, aren't we funny game, because it's actually funny. It is something completely different. I've not played anything like it before. The solo bots work really well as well. The whole system works amazingly well. You level up in parts of your body. So you have all these like little bucketfuls of tokens that represent your different parts of your body, brains, legs, teeth, or whatever it is. And all your attacks and everything utilize these different areas of strength in those. And then you can start accumulating more of those from attacking your enemies. And again, that's all funny, because actually when you actually look at the attacks and the stuff you're doing and the body parts that are consumed in using them, it actually brings those things to life more in a very, very, very weird kind of way. It's phenomenal. There are bits of it where I look at it and go, this game, I don't know whether it would have trouble from the lawyers if it was any bigger. I'm certain that Pokemon's lawyers don't get anywhere near it, but I think Satire usually has a pretty good get-out clause from just about everything. But
pretty much.
It's absolutely awesome. So it was a small Kickstarter, but if you look at Stranger Games Studios, the game's called Cabula. It is really good, and I think that is going to be
I want to play it.
And it's going to be number 4.
When you showed it to me at Board in the East, last Friday. I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. And some of the cards and stuff he showed me, I'm not going to mention which one I found particularly funny because it's a little bit not safe for work, and we try and be as safe for work as possible in this podcast. But yeah, there's definitely some components in it that I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I definitely want to give that game a go. And while it looks a little bit cheeky, I think it's definitely cheeky that's been done in a way that's quite tasteful and funny. So I'm really looking forward to playing that one with you for sure. So my number 8 is actually not a new game, but it's 2 of the new expansions for an older game that I think definitely make the game a lot better, and that's Lost Ruins of Arnak, the 2 expansions being the Expedition Leaders and the Ruins expansion. Definitely absolutely love the new expansions that they've brought out. I agree that it really does make the game a lot better. Like the Expedition Leaders, and what was the other expansion?
Missing Expedition.
Thank you, the Missing Expedition.
They sound too similar. They're both expedition-y.
So both of them, I do think make the game a bit better, and I have them sitting on my shelf, and this is so bad. I've played them on BGA or Board Game Arena, but I haven't actually played them in person because Lost Ruins is a game that I love, but I find that setting everything out in person, it's kind of like, you know, a game of Twilight Imperium or, you know, one of those big games like that. You've got to set aside quite a bit of time because there's so many moving parts for it. I find it easier to keep a track of on Board Game Arena, but I love it. And there was another expansion I know came out for it quite quickly after it came out, but every single expansion that's come out for Lost Ruins of Arnak, if you haven't played the base game, don't worry, play it with the expansions because if you play just the base game, you might go, oh, well, that's a bit boring because it's got some really good ideas to it, but the expansions really fix some of the things that were missing in the original game. Like there was definitely a little bit of flavor that wasn't there, and it's just made it that little bit more characterful and funny. And I think that's actually one of the things that I've found that doing this podcast has made me think very differently about board games and how I really approach them, and really thinking about, well, why do I like that game and what is it about that component of the game that really bugs me or something like that. And I think I've discovered for myself that I like games where there is a bit of a story to it, or you can make up a bit of flavour and story to it. And that'll be very evident when we get to my number 1, which I don't think will surprise anybody. But anything that does bring a bit of a story into it, yeah, absolutely. That definitely gets me going. And I think that's probably because I started my creative sort of juices of the gaming world as a LARPer, not actually really playing board games as much as I'm a LARPer. So if you don't know what LARPing is, it's live action role playing. I love creating a bit of a story. So yeah, I think that probably explains a lot about probably all the games that I've really picked, why I really like them, to be honest.
I would, and it's a difficult thing to say because I'll go back and look at my collection and go, oh, no, but what about that one? What about that one? But just off the top of my head, reacting to what you're saying there, Jen, and I would struggle to think of a better expansion, a more essential expansion to a game than the Expedition Leaders expansion to Arnak until you go back to, I don't know, Tuscany for viticulture or something like that. You know, it's one of those expansions that is 100% mandatory in my book. And it takes a game that, while it was loved, was just a little dry. That's the thing about the original Lost Ruins of Arnak. It did not feel, I mean, it's not meant to be fortune and glory. You know, it's not like roll your dice and see whether or not you manage to do an Indiana Jones Tarzan jump over a cliff. That's not what Lost Ruins of Arnak will ever be about. But it just didn't have any flavor to it, really. And then you bring in variable player powers, which lots of games do, but you bring in really good variable player powers, and you give character to the people behind them, and the powers seem to fit the characters, and suddenly you can start telling that story. And then I think Missing Expedition, which I haven't properly played yet, starts to add more to that. It's an interesting thing, Jenna, the Missing Expedition. Have you played with that competitively online yet? The second expansion?
I think we started playing a game with it and then we all had to run off. So no, I'm going to say no. Like, I read through the expansion and went, this is great. But no, I haven't finished playing a game with it though.
So the newest expansion, and I haven't played it, I know it adds the solo and the co-op, solo or two-player co-op sort of campaign. Or you can just kind of chuck almost everything in the box into your main game anyway. And that will include like new stuff, a couple of new characters that look great, like a couple of the best so far. It also has a whole bunch of event cards that provide drama to the story, I guess. I haven't looked at them specifically yet. But you can also shuffle those in and you can add various like creatures that will cause draw an event card and make different things happen. And of course, event cards make a game swingy. So the event cards look like they would both make it more thematic because suddenly, again, you'll have stuff actually occurring. They'll also look like they will probably be at times unfair because you go and you draw an event card and the event card is not what you need it to be. It's what somebody else would have needed it to be and so on. And you feel you've wasted your turn, or you get something super powered that basically gives you exactly what you need. But if they make it more thematic, I'm of the view that I don't care. That is part of the fun of the game because you're telling the story of the game. But I know a lot of people are going to hate them. So I know that that's going to be one of those things where I'll want to play with them and I'll say, right, do we put them in knowing that this might happen or do we leave them out? And I think it'll be 50-50 whether they stay in because I'll always go with what the other players want.
It ups the ante even more, that's for sure. See, this is one of the reasons I both love Mansions of Madness, and at the same time, I'm like, I could take it or leave it because it is a cooperative game and you're essentially playing against the system until someone goes insane. And this is why I actually actively try during the game sometimes to make sure I do go insane or I do die, because then I'm going to get some crazy other objective that means that, and I think my favorite game I've ever played of Mansions was where Rod went insane and turned into a pyromaniac, and we ended up with the mansion on fire and he kept on trying to divert us all away from putting the fire out, and we were like, no, we need to put the fire out. And he's like, but if we don't do this thing, we're not going to win anyway. So if it burns down, it doesn't really matter because we're not going to achieve this thing. So let it burn and we'll come back and deal with it afterwards. But in essence, his goal for the game was for us all to get set on fire and for the mansion to burn down. And that was his win condition. And he won. We all died in a blaze of glory. And that, Yeah,
we'll have to see what the event cards do.
Yes.
Because I just don't know. We don't know yet. They could just be just a little bit random. But the one thing that I can feel confident in is that the designers of Arnak will have thought about what they put in there. They won't be just random and ad hoc, because that's the thing that we've really seen is that they've put proper thought in trying to do everything really, really well.
I think they really have thought it out quite well.
So my number 7 is the game that when I unboxed it, it took me ages to work out why it contained a guitar pick. And I thought, is this just a novelty guitar pick? I picked up the guitar pick and started strumming my guitar with it. And then I thought, hold on, I know what the guitar pick's for. And I put it back in the game box. So my guitar pick looks a little bit bashed at the end, but it does serve a purpose. So this is probably one of the most original games of this year. It's a lovely game and it's almost complete genius. It's one of those games where it has a feel that I think is quite meditative, and you either get into it, but actually after a while you can start thinking, is it quite crunchy enough? It almost feels like it maybe goes on a little bit long, or it can get a little bit aimless, or you're not quite sure how it's going to flow. But it's also a lot of fun. And this is a game in which you are digging down through a 5-layer game board as archaeologists or excavators of this mystical plane, removing different levels of the ground as you go to get to the bottom on what is one of the most impressive bits of game board engineering I've ever seen. And the game is called Ice, it's a little bit more pretentious than that. The game is called ICE. The game's called Ice. Why they had to call it ICE, I don't know, and put the gaps between it just makes it harder to find on BGG and makes it harder to find elsewhere. It's called ICE, but effectively, ICE is set on this kind of this strange icy landscape where people are trying to explore down to get various artifacts and return them to their cities. And to do that, they're excavating these different layers of hex tiles. And then under the hex tiles, if they're at the top layer, they'll find a bonus they can do something with. But after that, it becomes more of a set collection game. They're trying to get certain combinations of stuff that they can then trade in for points by shipping them back to the city, all the way through until you reach a mysterious artifact at the bottom. That mysterious artifact on the bottom then gives you a rule that will fall into play for the next time you play the game. So there's like a little bit of a sort of rotational thing here. And the reason for the guitar pick is that the guitar pick is kind of useful in actually getting these tiles out. So where you're trying to dig these things out, you just put the guitar pick underneath and just flip them up with it. And as you've got your workers, you'll have your little archaeologists and so forth that are sat on these tiles. And when you break a tile that's got some archaeologists near it, then they will fall in different ways into the areas underneath there, which will allow you to then go sort of exploring as you choose to with those archaeologists in order to go and find more stuff. And it's quite a beautiful, magical game. It feels sometimes almost like a little bit, not style over substance is probably not fair, but it's almost that bit where there isn't as much tangible that you're grabbing onto. It's something where there's almost a dreamlike feel to it as you're kind of wandering through. So it's not a crunchy strategy game in that sense. And I think that's something which it either is going to really click or you're going to be like, something isn't quite clicking with this game. But there's nothing else out there like it at the moment. It is fun. It is engaging. It's beautifully produced. And, you know, if it's certainly a major achievement for the designers and the publishers. So ICE is my number 7.
I remember seeing you playing that at, was it the first board in the East? Maybe it was the second one.
Might have been your second. I think it was probably, might even have been third. But who knows? Yeah, it was playing. I was playing it at board in the East, yeah.
I remember seeing you playing it at board in the East and thinking, wow, that looks so cool. I really want to play that. Ooh, obsession. And so that's where, I definitely want to give that game a go. It looks very, very cool. And I love the idea of the mechanics where that is a game, I think, archaeology-wise, they absolutely hit the nail on the head with that one, because that's what it's all about, right? Digging down and discovering new things. So, yeah, good choice for number 7, absolutely. I actually changed my number 7 while we've been sitting here chatting, because I remembered the one I put in number 7, I actually discovered last year, not this year. But one that I did discover this year, again at BunnyCon, and thanks to you, Chris, was Transmissions. And if you haven't played Transmissions, it is the cutest little robot game you have ever seen. I love the mechanics of it. I love that it's not just, you know, another roll the dice and move up the board and that kind of thing. Like, it actually has a little bit more to it. And the pieces are really cute. I love a game that's visual. You know, we all know from me already that if it's pretty, literally like half the games I bought at MeepleCon, I looked at the box and went, "Oh, that's pretty." Didn't even read the mechanics of the game and just bought it. So I'm a sucker for pretty visuals for sure. And it's cute. It's so cute. Like, I really want to get my hands on a copy. And it's essentially you're playing this game as, oh my goodness, what's his name? You're essentially Wall-E in this game. You're going around and you're collecting things from the world as a little robot and trying to basically build your collection up so that it makes you happy, you know. And it's just that there's not, I don't think, any sort of deep message in it. It's just a lovely, light, pretty little game with robots and butterflies and flowers, and give it a go. Give it a go if you haven't. Get a hold of a copy if you can. I think it's a really good game that you could also play cross-generational. Like, I think it'd be pretty kid-friendly. Probably slightly older kids, you know, like 8 and up, rather than, you know, when I think of family friendly games, I'm usually thinking sort of 5 and up. But I do think this is family friendly if you've got kids that are a little bit older and, you know, have seen Wall-E or any kind of robot thing and they're really into it. They'll love this game as well.
I've forgotten all about Transmissions. It's a lovely, lovely, cute game.
You taught it to me at BunnyCon.
And I think it was fairly new to me when I got it there. So I think that might have been a game from this last year. I just have to check on BGG and just see what in fact I can check on sort of Kickstarter and just see when I got my copy delivered, which is how it would actually count. But no, it's a lovely, lovely game. And there is no story, because that's one of the things. It was based on the art of an artist called Matt Dixon, who draws these robots. And Matt Dixon is absolutely emphatic that there is no story to these robots. They are where they are. They collect trash. They wander around. You know, they do stuff with like whatever it is, like plumbing equipment and so on. And you can create a story if you want to, or you can see one, but there isn't one. It's just the art. So effectively, that's sort of been brought in. So that's why there's no sort of narrative explanation in the game or anything like that. It is what it is, and you make the story as you want it to be. But it's really good choice.
In complete contradiction to what I was saying, right? Yeah. You know, like I love a game with a good story.
Yeah. But it's a game that can tell a story. But then
on the
own.
flip side,
exactly.
Exactly. I like that, you know, it would actually, thinking about that, it'd be a really good tool to teach your children to build a story, because there is no story behind the game. Get them to make it up as they go. Why are they collecting that?
My number 6, is probably going to be more. I don't know. We'll have to see. We haven't had any crossovers yet, but is one that I know would be a crossover with a lot of people over the past month, given the enthusiasm for it. And it's a game I first discovered over a year ago on cutout bits of paper and so on, because I was playtesting it. And as happens when you playtest, in this case, I was playtesting the solo mode, and I then put it away once that playtest had finished, and kind of thought, I think this one is going to go down quite well with the Stone Meyer fan base when it comes out live. And then life went on, and this game appeared. And this game is a game about bees, or was a game about bees, but they thought, ooh, there already are games about bees. It's like Honey Buzz and stuff. Why don't we make it Space Bees? So, yes, the game is apiary, or in fact, Space Bees, as it is now known. I'm finding increasingly that nobody calls it apiary; they just call it Space Bees. and so everyone says, "Well, it's a game of Space Bees." Everyone's painting their bee or their big bee queenship, and it's a almost classical abstract Eurogame. Almost in the like Italian school of Euro games, because it's quite like things like Teotihuacan and games like that. And I don't like those games particularly. There's something where they're just too dry. Apiary somehow manages to step above that because it moves quick. It flows fast. It flows energetically. There wasn't a game that was taught more at MeepleCon than Apiary.
Yes.
It seems to have hit the ground running. It does a few things that aren't particularly unique or original really well, in a way that it just clicks. It's just a really good, solid, enjoyable game that doesn't outstay its welcome, even with 5 players. So my number 6 is Apiary. And Jen?
My number 6 is Apiary. That's so funny. I love that both of us put it as number 6. You know, it's almost, I think the only reason it didn't bump up for me above the one that I chose as my number 5, which is, you're going to be like, what? When I say it, but mainly because the very first time I played it was after MeepleCon. And I was feeling so tired and I had such a bad headache. And it was literally just that I've only played it the once. But even the one time that I played it, I went, oh, this is actually really good. And I think if I played this game again, I'd really love it. And the fact that it is Space Bees. Because who doesn't love Space Bees? Like, so cool to have them as Space Bees. And yeah, we kept on calling it Space Bees as well. No one calls it Apiary. It's Space Bees.
I think that is something that I know sort of Jamie Stegmaier will be very happy about, I suspect, because the design of the game, the new designer, Connie Vogelman, it's a fantastic game in that light. And I think Jamie's main contribution as a developer was saying, hey, let's make it Space Bees. I'm sure Jamie did a whole lot of other stuff as well. But ultimately, it's Connie's game. And that, I think, has worked. I think it's made it a little bit more fun. I think having the big sort of queenship thing is fun. There's been some lovely sort of blinging up going on with people's copies of Apiary. It's just a great, nice, fun game. I don't think it's ever going to be in lists of the top 100 of all time. I think it's going to be one of those games that you can always pull out because it doesn't take forever. It's not that hard to teach.
It's really easy to teach. It's really, while it's got a lot of moving parts, once you get the mechanics of how the game works, it's relatively simple. It's family friendly. It's just a really cute game that I understand why it's exploded and everybody loves it so much. It's really good. Well, with that in mind, why don't we switch across and I'll do my number 5.
Why not? Go for it. What's your number 5, Jan?
Absolutely. My number 5's Walk and Roll. And I know that sounds so ridiculous, but I love it. I love it so much. I got a copy of Walk and Roll and its expansion, the Korean Wave, at MeepleCon. And it is effectively Yahtzee with a Chinese food menu. And I love it. It's so silly. I think it amps things up a little bit. And as you know what, I keep on contradicting myself. I know I'm like, oh, I hate games that just roll the dice and play. But this is cute because the way that the game works, everybody's got the same menu in front of them. In just the base version anyway. It gets changed around a little bit as you go up and you do expansions and that kind of thing. But everybody effectively has their menu in front of them and you're trying to make dishes out of the dice that are rolled so that you complete your menu or a section of your menu first. And what I really like is that there are 4 white dice and 2 red dice. And the person that's rolling the dice gets to use all of the rolled dice. But everybody else on their turn can only use the 4 white dice. So if you get really strategic about it, you can stuff everybody up completely by making sure that the 2 red dice that you keep are ones that make it really easy for you to make dishes, but the other 4 you can't really make a dish or something out of. Like it's definitely a really cute game to be a bit competitive and cutthroat. And they could probably rename it Cutthroat Kitchen Walk and Roll and it would probably suit pretty well. But yeah, it's great because kind of like with Yahtzee, you get to roll the dice 3 times. You can't go, well, I'm putting that one aside, or you don't have to go, I'm putting that one aside and not rolling it again. You can literally just roll the entire hand 3 times if you want to. You can put some dice aside in the first roll, do another roll and go, oh, no, that doesn't work, and then roll everything again in your last roll if you want to. So it's quite flexible. It's quite fun. It's quite silly. It's very visual. The graphics are cute. And it's definitely, again, I'm loving the family-friendly games. I keep saying this. I don't have kids. I don't at all, but I love games that are intergenerational where you can introduce kids to games. I've got many, many, many nieces and nephews, and running Board in the West, we have lots of families that come with kids. So I love that we're getting a bit more of a collection up of games that are more intergenerational, where we can introduce people to games and they are a little bit easier, but they're still fun and engaging. And Walk and Roll and the Korean Wave, I definitely think are fantastic for that. So if you can find a copy, get yourself a copy. They're cheap, they're cheerful, they're fun.
My number 5 is probably the game on my list that is the hardest to get a copy of. And it might be and it might not be. I need to actually have a look and see whether or not there's sort of copies of it left, because it's a very indie little game. But I am obsessed, as I think has come across on multiple podcasts, with the kind of escape room puzzle in a box type games. And so Jen's put one on this list already, and Exit, I think it would have been impossible for there not to be one on my list. And I've played, as well as the exits and unlocks and so on, I've got very into some of the more creative games being done by organizations like Post Curious. I have the Medusa project and the Vandermis dossier coming to me from a Kickstarter at some point soon. That's stuck in I think a warehouse somewhere in Holland on its way over. I love playing these games. Some of them go to ludicrous levels of bling, to a point where even I've had to say, look, I'm not paying that for something that'll last 3 hours. There's a game called Mother of Frankenstein that has, I think, some of the most beautiful components for a puzzle game I've ever seen, but it's just like the cost per hour of play is just so ludicrous you can't really justify it. But this year I played a game that wasn't by any of those creatives that was in this genre. It was designed by a guy called Spencer Beebe, who likes designing puzzles, and he put together a kind of escape room in a box thing where it was based on a pack of playing cards. Each pack of playing card in the pack had a puzzle that was built into it. Some of those puzzles involved different combinations of cards. So it wasn't one puzzle per card. You had like 52 puzzles, but some of them would be one per card. Some cards would be involved in multiple puzzles. You might have a puzzle that involved like almost the entire deck or like all of one suit. You might have other ones that are just one card or 2 cards, 3 cards. And it was relatively easy to work out how to do it. It was integrated with the website, which in this case is a good thing. And it will be almost a spoiler to say some of the things that are fabulous about it. But this little pack of cards, this little box called Lost in the Shuffle, and I've played a lot of these games, is single-handedly the best example of this type of game, exit, unlock, post curious, whatever it is, that I have played in the last few years, if not ever. It is brilliant. Jen, I will dig out the copy if I've got somewhere, and I will pass that over to you because I've obviously already played it. It is... Instead of taking a sort of serious bent or being like really left field, like some of the unlock and exit ones could be, where it's like, you have something and you're just going, well, I don't quite get this. Maybe I get this. There are so many different imaginative ideas in here. It's just ridiculous. But the best way to describe it is that it takes the spirit of the video game Portal and puts it into effectively into a puzzle game. The creator of the game has recorded a bunch of little videos which are there as you go on when you enter into the game, about how you're involved in a big kind of psychological experiment with getting these cards. As you get a certain amount of the puzzles, you start getting little power-ups to help you identify how many different things you've got left to solve. The amount of different things where you go, hold on, what did you thought of that? Bits of internet research you end up doing, the bits of investigations, the things you learn playing this game. There are a handful of American cultural references in there, which for those that aren't from the States will require some Googling, but not difficult Googling to work out. There was nothing on there that had me stumped forever. There was stuff on there that had me stumped for a while. It's amazing that in what is effectively a pack of 52 cards modeled on a playing card deck and a website and a few clever things that they've done, and it would be a real spoiler to spoil everything that's there, that effectively one guy in his bedroom has created what I think is the best example of the genre, hands down. So it's called Lost in the Shuffle. The designer is called Spencer Beebe. I don't know whether he's still got copies, but if he is, I'm sure he'll ship them sort of wherever. And I'm so excited to see what he does next. If you can get hold of a copy of it and you like that kind of game, do it. It's fantastic.
I definitely want to have a look at that, because I know that's a game that we were chatting about previously. Like, I know you've definitely told me about it previously, and I would love to get a hold of a copy. I would love to borrow your copy because it sounds like it definitely right up my alley. I love all those kind of games, games that make you think and do puzzles and problem solve. Love them. So I'm in. I know that the other one that you gave me as well, I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I've been waiting for my sister and brother-in-law to arrive because I wanted to play it with them, and I know that they'll really love it because my brother-in-law particularly, massive board game fan. We should definitely have him on as a guest on the podcast sometime because he's played so many different games, and Yeah, looking forward to giving that one a go. Absolutely. It sounds really, really good.
So I've just had a look, Jen, while we're chatting, just to say it is still available from him at spencerispuzzling.com. Spencerispuzzling.com. It's $24.99 US dollars. And I don't know what the shipping would be like to Australia. So that would be the pain, but it is only a small deck of cards, and that's how big it is as well. So it's not a huge thing to post. So it is definitely still available on the market.
Do you know, the last time that I had to ship something from the US, even though it was only a small thing, like it was, oh my goodness, I think it was only $8 or something US. The shipping on it was $35. And I was like, absolutely not. It was a little, a couple of little feet for my sewing machine that I found cheaper on a website in the US that I could get them walking into a store in Australia, and went, oh my God, $8, fantastic. I'll buy that. The shipping won't be that much. $35 shipping. It was cheaper to walk down to Spotlight and go grab one.
Yeah, that's often the case. Every now and again, you'll get someone who will ship incredibly cheaply. But then I got when I got Mechs and Minions, I ordered that from the US, which is still the most ludicrously cheap game for its production value and size. There's a game box that is absolutely enormous, weighs about 10k. I think the shipping from the States was like $14, and it's like huge. Absolutely massive. It's one of the biggest game boxes I've got. It happens because it's made by the League of Legends people, and they have so many bucket loads of money that basically they've just said, look, this was a labor of love. We just want people to be able to get it. I think they're just taking a loss on it. I think that they've taken a loss on the whole production, and they don't care because they just make that much money on the video game that inspired it. But it's, Mechs versus Minions is phenomenal, but that's a separate discussion. Jen, what's your number 4?
I cheated a little bit here. So my number 4 is 2 games, and it's 18 holes and 10 wickets, only because they're by a designer who I know, whose name is Ryan Boucher. He frequently comes to Board in the West, and I've looped both of the games together because I'm not usually a sports person, not at all. But he's done such a great job of designing both of these games that it sounds really mean to even say it, but I can overlook the fact that they're about sports because they're such fun games to play. And I know for some people that'll just make it 10 times better because maybe they love golf or they absolutely love cricket. So for them, the fact that those games are about that as well makes it 10 times better. But to create a game that's so good that I can overlook 2 sports that I frequently joke with people are so terrible, because cricket is literally just a picnic with a bit of a ball tossed around as far as I'm concerned, and golfing is basically walking with a stick and ball, both of them are really, really fun games. I know we had a tournament for 18 holes at MeepleCon, and everybody that participated were people who hadn't played it before, and the person who won it was like, I never ever would have picked up this game if I'd just seen it on a shelf because it's about golf. But they're so good, and there's so many really fabulous little components. 10 wickets, most people will not have seen this yet because it's only just been delivered on Kickstarter, and I happen to be quite lucky that I live about 5 minutes away from Ryan. So he messaged me and said, hey, it's arrived if you want to come grab your copy. And I've got your copy as well, Chris. We've been able to actually have a go at it where a lot of people haven't. But definitely in the new year, keep an eye out for 10 wickets. I'm really, really hoping that it becomes available in stores as well, because for a cricket game, it's really, really good. Saying this from the point of view of someone who hates cricket. So that should give you an idea of how good these games are. I mean, 10 wickets is a card game, which is essentially you're trying really, really hard to get the highest score out of your game by being strategic about which players you're putting out at which times. And, how many wickets you're taking, as opposed to are you going to collect wickets or are you going to collect players? Because both of them give you points in different ways. And I love a game that makes me think and is a puzzle solver and strategic. And both of them are so good for that.
Ryan's games are great, and he is actually, have to be careful what we say here, but there are other designs that he's got kind of that he's been working on and sort of sharing in the local groups that aren't sports based. And there's some real indications that they are not just going places, but actually getting some really, really good attention. And that I think we'll be seeing quite a lot more of Ryan over the years. I wouldn't be that surprised if he was a household name game designer in maybe 3 years' time. 2 or 3 years' time. So we'll see how things go. And that's a lot of that's just to do with the speed of the how long it takes to take something from conception to actually get it out there and get it played and to get around. But I think I see big things for Ryan. Also, if you are playing 18 holes, do not ignore the Chaos Golf mode. Easily the most board gamery way of playing that game.
He actually said to me when I told him we were doing a tournament at MeepleCon, he's like, "Oh, do the Chaos version, because it's so much better." And I'm like, okay, cool. So I think Ryan agrees with you on that one. So what then is your number 4, Chris?
Right. So my number 4 is a semi-cooperative game, because for those that know me know I love semi-cooperative games, and it's quite a new semi-cooperative game. It's a fun, light, easy to play card game in which it's a trick-taking game, in fact, where you are trying to meet various different trick-taking targets, except somebody around the table is trying to ensure that you don't succeed in doing so. Very, very simple, very straightforward, very easy to teach, and a bucket load of fun. It's Inside Job. And in terms of just the kind of light-hearted, fun card games that also introduce people to sort of semi-co-op mechanics and how semi-co-op can be fun, because some people are a bit kind of about semi-cooperative games, it's a great little game. It's great to have a game like that that's not a social deduction game. Obviously, all semi-co-ops have a little bit of that because you're trying to work out who the traitor is, but it's not really a social deduction game. You're trying to work things out from the way that you play your tricks. And every trick you play has a different objective. As you take on the slightly more complicated modes, you can kind of bid and barter with various different resources. You've got these suitcases that effectively allow you to sort of soup up what you can achieve. And that can be good for the group because it can kind of accelerate things, or it can avoid too many of these getting banked up with one person. But if the traitor gets too many of these, they're going to be able to stop and win the game. It's actually not an awful lot to say about Inside Job, apart from that it's really good, really accessible. It's just a great, super fun card game.
I haven't played it myself, but I know that I don't even think it was you I was talking to about it. Someone at Board in the West was telling me about Inside Job, and I was like, I'm going to have to try that one sometime because it looks very, very good. So you'll have to bring that along for a Board in the West, Chris. So we're up to number 3. We're getting pretty close. My number 3 is a very cute game that, again, this one's a visual one. Sucker for a cutesy game, one that I'm sure all of us have absolutely loved and enjoyed going to Yum Cha at some point and seeing all the cute little buns everywhere that you can grab, and it's Steam Up. If you have not seen Steam Up, you have to go have a look at a copy. It is a very simple game all about grabbing the Yum Cha that your particular character really, really loves and getting the highest score possible. So a very simple game in essence, but grab a copy of the Kickstarter version if you can, the deluxe version of it, because the little plastic pieces that look like actual little Yum Cha buns are so cute. It's adorable. It's one that I've pulled out just to show people so they can see how cute the pieces are. And we've spent ages just sitting talking about the adorable pieces and memories around going out to Yum Cha for lunch. That it's a great little game. Definitely competitive. It falls into that cute and competitive category again. But even just reading through some of the character sheets for the characters that you can play in the game, They're very, very funny. And I particularly love the Picky Piggy. The Picky Piggy is so, so cute. There's a vegetarian character in the game, and they're adorable. So if you've not played Steam Up yet, grab yourself a copy. Really fantastic little game. Again, another Guff Studios game. So that was another one that's been donated to our library by Stella and Tarrant from Guff Studios. And it's been incredibly popular. I know at MeepleCon I saw it whipped out quite a bit. Have you actually had a go at it, Chris?
I've not had a go. I've seen it many times. And yeah, it has a really, really, really impactful table presence. It makes you hungry. I love Yum Cha. And I don't go out for Yum Cha that often because my wife's wheat-free, which actually restricts what you can have. And Yum Cha is best something enjoyed as a group, because otherwise you end up just eating loads of the same thing. You need a big group of people. And it's just not happened. But I love that. So I look at that game and it just immediately just makes my mouth watering and I just want to go and eat. I'm not sure if that's the healthiest thing that you can get from a game, but it is just gorgeous looking.
Do you know there's actually a couple of really good Yum Chas Yum Cha restaurants in Glen Waverley and in Springvale, which is not far from where you live, where they do have a lot of gluten-free options. So I'll get some names for you.
Springvale is like, for anybody that doesn't know the east of Melbourne, Springvale is a little pocket of chaos in the middle of basically not a lot. Like industrial estates, and you get into Springvale and it's like suddenly it's just, what? It just makes you completely delirious, and attempting to park up and go to the shops there. It's just like, why didn't I just get the train? But it's wonderful. It always feels like a little kind of
it's so good.
Almost like another world, just sort of hidden in the middle of what feels like the middle of nowhere. But it's not that far out. It's a beautiful little place. So my number 3, and now we're getting on to the big hitters here. My number 3 is probably not going to surprise anybody that this is on a top 10 list this year. I suspect it's on bucket loads of top 10 lists this year. It's been on many of the ones I've seen. I started wondering whether it actually counted as this year when I was putting it on the list, because I was thinking I knew I discovered it this year. Then I realized it quite clearly was this year because it was on everybody else's this year as well. It's the game that some people thought was the Ark Nova killer. It's Earth. One year we had Ark Nova, big nature game, lots and lots and lots of cards, lots of different ways you can get combos, lots of different ways everything plays off against each other. Every card's unique. And then the following year, you get Earth. Lots and lots and lots of cards. Every card's unique, lots of combos and stuff. And then so many people have gone, Earth is the best thing since sliced bread. And then you go, well, Ark Nova is the best thing since sliced bread. These games are not as similar as it may look at all. Earth, for those that haven't played Earth, is probably a lot less thematic than Ark Nova. Ark Nova, really does sort of lean in. You can start seeing the zoo you're building and everything like that. Earth is actually more of a quick fire game. What makes it amazing in terms of the combo building is the same thing that I think you were talking about with Walk and Roll. It's that you're never idle. You pick an action, you take an action that you're going to do, and then you get to take a stronger action, and everybody else gets to take a slightly weaker action. It's got that kind of follow mechanic. And that means that as you're playing Earth, you're always playing. You're never waiting for anybody. Then when you're playing, you'll get combos where now I can do this that bounces off this, that allows me to do this, that now I do this. And you're setting up all these different combinations with your little 4x4 grid that you're building as your island. And the fun of, I can do this, and now I can do this. What about that? And now I can do that. And what about this bit over there? It creates that kind of dopamine wave where suddenly you're like, fun. The pleasure hits that come from playing Earth are what have made it a really, really popular game, because it is just like, cool thing. You're doing this the whole time. You can't really sit there that much in a game where everybody else is in the game. You get to the end of it, work out who's won. Do you really care? I think one of the arguments about Earth has been said is that, well, you can get better at it, but actually, how random is it? To what extent do you hit all these things? And there's so many different combinations of stuff that you could be doing that actually you've got can you really have a strategy in this game at all? Do you just have to play it as tactics? I think it is a more tactical game than a strategic game, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
I haven't played it yet. I really want to have a go. I know you've talked about it a few times, but I don't have a copy. I haven't played it. I would love to get a hold of a copy. Or again, board in the west, board in the east. We'll have to have a go sometime.
I think Earth will be a mainstay for some time, it'll be one of those games where the only reason that you don't get to play it is because you want to play something else that particular evening. But I don't think there'll ever be a challenge with that. I think people will be playing Earth for a fair while. I'd just be interesting to see which one of them between Earth and Ark Nova has the most longevity, if you like, and which one, stays, or whether they both stay the ground, whether they become evergreens, whether either of them kind of like slips back a bit. It'd be really, really interesting to see just where that goes. It's a lovely, elegant, well-designed, slightly chaotic, very, very fun card game.
It sounds a little bit like the game that we were playing, that Rod and I and there were two other people playing it at Board in the East. Is it It's a Wonderful World?
Yes, I can actually, because that's one of like you go combo after combo, and I think you've got to play It's a Wonderful World more times than I've played it.
Yeah,
in order to actually know what you're doing.
Yes, I kind of picked up very quickly. The idea of that game is to get yourself a really good combo and focus on what your character wants. And I can't remember I think Rod and I scored very closely to each other. Like there was only 1 point separating us, but we well and truly got much higher scores than the other two people playing the game. And I think it's just because both of us are very used to playing those games where you just focus on one thing and building that up and knowing that focusing on that one thing is going to get you the highest score. But I also like about that game that it's very much a everybody plays at the same time. Those are good games that everyone plays at the same time games because they keep everybody really, really engaged, especially for people who have ADHD.
Yeah, amen
really
to that.
Good.
And I think actually It's a Wonderful World, it's a completely different game to Earth because it's a drafting game and so on. But actually it's not a bad comparison in terms of the feel of the games. That's quite a good one. And it's a wonderful little game. It's a Wonderful World because it actually, you describe it, sounds pretty generic, pretty ordinary, really. It's got nice art, but it's pretty ordinary. But it's not. It's just really, really, really well designed, and it gives you that combo buzz. And so Earth, yes, it's a similar feeling.
My number 2 is very silly and very cutesy, and definitely a game that I picked up before I had any idea of how to play it because I looked at the box and went, that is ridiculously cute. I need to own that. And it's Plantopia. It's a really, really silly little game that is a card game all about building a garden. And you need, seriously, pause the podcast, go to YouTube, search the video for how to play Plantopia, and you'll either love it or hate it because it's this totally cutesy little video done in this little anime style voice, and the cards are all like puns. So you've got the geometry and the symmetry and instead of tulips, it's tulips, and it's so silly, but I love it because it's really cute. All the cards have this beautiful texture to them where they've got a lovely little design about them as well. There's all these really flashy, shiny, holographic cards in there. So for somebody who's really visual, this game's fantastic. If you're playing with kids, it's a really great game again. Like we're sensing a theme here. A really good game that you can whip out and play with the family. It's a really good game that's got a lot of dad jokes in it. So it's got a little bit of something, I think, for everybody. And it's a super easy game. Like it's literally, you need to build your garden, and the first person to have 4 established trees in their garden ends the game, and then you figure out who has the most magical leaves, and that person's the winner. So super easy premise, super cute game. Not a huge amount to it other than visually it's super, super cute and pretty, and I'm a sucker for super cute and pretty.
Yeah, and it's fun to play.
It is very fun. What's your number 2, Chris?
So my number 2, and when I wrote my list, my guess was that I would have either one or two crossovers with you. There's not much room left for this one to cross over, but this is the other one I wondered whether or not would be on your list as well, or whether or not it wouldn't be. So it would. We'll obviously find out in a moment. So my number 2 is a new version of an old classic game that I hold very dear, that Jen, you hold very dear, that makes it a little bit more mobile, is one word, but yes, possibly a little more dynamic. And this is the latest version of Clank, Clank Catacombs. This almost needs no introduction. In particular, if you listen to the podcast, we talked about Clank before many, many, many times. Clank is brilliant. It's one of the best game systems around. It's one of the best implementations of deck building around. The only reason that I ever got into playing Dune Imperium was because of the fact that it effectively took the Clank system and then evolved it, because it was the same designer. And the only reason the game about Dune, which I find intensely dull, sorry, there's a theme, but the game's fantastic because it basically steals a whole bunch of stuff from Clank. But at the same point, here is Clank. Clank, as you all know and love it, except that suddenly your map is adaptable and evolving as you go. And by the way, sometimes it might have like rotating tiles and ghost tiles and stuff like this. So it makes it a bazillion times more dynamic on the table than it otherwise was. And this, to me, was just like icing on the cake. I'm still not sure whether Clank in space with like a couple of the expansions thrown in, particularly the new sort of arcade machine ones, which is quite a lot of fun. Is that my favorite Clank, or Catacombs, which is actually almost a little bit more sort of like stripped back, but it's got the flexible board. But the moment I lean towards Catacombs, because it's just done so well, right? You know, kind of the component quality on the tiles is not amazing. That's been one of the things when Direwolf sort of took back their IP from Renegade. The component quality's gone down in a couple of places. But it's good enough, right? And the actual game, it just sings. It's beautiful. It's more Clank. It's Clank with a map that's never the same. It's Clank with a map that twists and bends as you go, which just feels so appropriate for Clank, when you can suddenly find that your location moves and suddenly you're stuck in the middle of nowhere instead of like 2 steps from escape. It's just a phenomenal game.
The only reason Clank Catacombs was not on my list is because I knew it would be on yours. And it's such a good game. I agree with you. I almost put it on my list and then went, no, there's a couple of other ones I want to shout out that I think were really good. And I knew we'd chat about it anyway. But I agree. I think it takes Clank to the next level. And I know you haven't played it yet, but I can't wait to either play with you the, Clank Legacy. I love the fact that Clank is one of those games that you can play it over and over and over again, and every time you play it, it's a little bit different. It's a really good crossover game in terms of new people can play Clank. So if you've never played a board game other than Monopoly ever before, such a good introductory game that shows people that board games can be so much more than just rolling a dice, paying for a piece of property and then being indebted to the bank for the rest of your life, which, gee, that doesn't sound like real life at all, does it? Clank is a really good way to show people how fun board games can be. And all the different versions of it have their own amazing merit. So very, very good choice as a number 2. And I guess that brings us to our number 1, and nobody's going to be surprised about my number 1. I've banged on about it all year long. I think it's been the discussion of almost every podcast episode since I got it for my birthday this year, but it's Obsession. It's such a good game. It really is such a good game. If you love Marrying Mr. Darcy, if you love anything to do with Jane Austen, if you love a game where it gives you the opportunity to make silly, fun games up about it, or silly, fun stories up about the characters that you're playing with, it's absolutely fantastic. It is so well designed. I'm so looking forward to the new Kickstarter components coming out. I haven't yet bought myself the expansions other than the Kickstarter one, only because Rod and I have a rule. And that rule is for the 2 months before Christmas, we are not allowed to buy things that we really, really want for ourselves, to give each other the opportunity to buy things that we do really want. And I'm going to have to make sure he doesn't listen to this version of the podcast, but he's getting something, you know what, I'm not even going to say what it is. He's getting something for Christmas that is a board game that he's been wanting for the longest time. And every time we are somewhere that has a copy of it, he's like, oh my God, babe, look, they've got it. And I'm like, no, we just can't afford it right now. And it's been really annoying right before Christmas to be like, oh no, not that thing that it's perfectly reasonable that we should buy. And I have to come up with another excuse as to why we now can't have it. But I've had to do the same with Obsession. And every time I've seen the Obsession expansions and wanted to buy them, I've been a very good girl and I haven't bought them to give him the opportunity to buy them for me for Christmas. And I don't even think now I am actually getting them for Christmas. But he might surprise me.
We don't really need to repeat it because we've said it on the podcast so many times. Obsession is basically, for both of us, it's just one of the games of forever. And I know, Jenny, so you discovered it this year because it's not a this year game, so it's on your list for that reason. But if we were doing any kind of a top 10 list of all games of all time, I think we both struggle not to put Obsession somewhere in that top 10. It's just phenomenal. Absolutely amazing game. So my number one will, again, for people that have listened to the podcast, if they've been taking any sort of punts over the last year and kind of thinking, what hasn't he mentioned or so forth? What is the game that Chris was a little bit obsessed about that hasn't come up yet in this? Then you'll probably guess it. So I like games with a little bit of chaos in them, as you may have seen from some of the games on this list. We were talking about Cabula earlier. We were talking about Earth has that. Clank Catacombs has that. That slightly sort of chaotic craziness about it. All of those, their chaos and craziness does not equate to the chaos and craziness in this game. In this game, there are not just your player characters on the board. There could be up to 25 characters on the board, and they're all different, and they all want different things, and you're one of them, but you could be another one, and no one knows which one you are, and you're all running around with different agendas, except you might not be, and at the same point, you're all in a space station that's going to crash to Earth in 11 seconds, and are you going to get hit on the head by the chimp who's riding around with a hammer because he just wants to steal shiny things, or is the guy who's got his little Topara effect carnivorous plant going to set it on everyone and eat them all, or is somebody going to let the strange scientific experiment out of the high security enclosure, and they're going to ramp around all over the ship destroying stuff? Is someone going to try and blow the ship up? Will someone rescue them trying to blow the ship up? Can you escape the ship in the most daredevil possible kind of way because actually you want to do that? How many people got rescued? Do they know stuff they shouldn't? This is the craziest game of the year, Station 4. And there is not,
I knew that was going to be on your top 10 at least.
Yeah, there is not another game in existence like Station 4. Station 4 is not a short, lightweight game. In fact, it's arguably a simulation because a lot of the rules in it are really sort of simulate what it would be like if you were on this space station plummeting to Earth in 13 minutes. But at the same point, it's also completely chaotic. You're taking these movements. You can kind of predict what other people would like to do. Above a certain player count, you actually have joint victors and joint losers. So you've got to remember that it's not necessarily just one person winning the game. Two people can win the game if you go higher. You are really just trying to work out the best way to do what you need to do, and then watching as other people, either on purpose but more often by accident, completely scupper it, and so on. Station 4, once you get into the rhythm of it, though, flows really beautifully. Its characters and the characterization have been created brilliantly. I got the miniatures. I painted the miniatures quickly because that's almost essential to really work the game. And to their credit, I believe the publishers who are looking at the second edition are going to put some standees in there. It comes with these lovely wooden counters, but standees are better because you want to see the characters on the ship, right? Because you want to know very quickly who's who, who's where, who's they're doing. And that was the only fault in the original box, where it had these lovely little kind of wooden tokens that just made that a little bit too hard to work out at a glance. There's a lot we could say about Station 4, but I've said it before on previous episodes of the podcast. You may hate it. You could love it. Station 4 is not a game of halves. It's a game that's going to take 2 or 3 hours of your time to play. It's potentially a bit of an event game. It's a game that if you play again and again and again, you start learning different ways of strategizing it. But if you're playing with people who are learning those, then they get counteracted and it goes back to being chaos. So it's just it's just crazy. And for the sheer beauty and love and attention that went into that game and the amount of fun I have playing with it, Stationfall is 100% my number one of 2023.
Very good choice for number one of 2023. And, you know, I actually found something recently that you prompted me that I forgot to tell you about when I was looking around on Thingiverse. And if you don't know what Thingiverse is, it means you're not into 3D printing. Thingiverse is basically a giant library online of free 3D printing files, and they have various different versions on there of the board game storage inserts for Stationfall, which I know the game itself doesn't come with the most organised box. Come on, how many board games do you actually come with the most organised box? But I did see recently, and it looks like it's now come down off of Thingiverse, but somebody had created little 3D printable characters for all the different characters in Thingiverse, but it's not on there anymore. So I don't know.
I've got the 3D minis, and I guess that would be, you know, if somebody was putting the 3D printable versions of their minis up, then that might be a little bit dodgy from a copyright perspective, because you can go and buy the miniatures. So I've got the miniatures, but no, I mean, some of the inserts that you can get printed off are great.
They weren't the standard ones, though. They seem to be somebody else's art interpretation of the Stationfall characters that they turned into their own minis that were a little bit more sort of Looney Tunes character style ones that I was like, oh, I have to remember to tell Chris about this, but they're not there anymore. But there are some very good versions now on Thingiverse of board game storage for Stationfall. So definitely worth having a look at that. I really want to play it. I know that we've been talking about it since BunnyCon, and I want to arrange a day that we all get together and have a game of Stationfall, because it sounds really fun and chaotic and silly. So yeah, I definitely want to give that one a go. That's for sure. So that's our top 10 for the year.
And I think that leaves us to wish everybody, if it is before Christmas and you listen to this, have a really fabulous Christmas. If it's just after Christmas, I hope you had a really good, fabulous Christmas and have an awesome New Year. Thank you to everybody who has been, who've listened to the podcast wherever you are in the world. If you've been coming to and playing at Melbourne Meeples events and so forth during the year, if you've been coming to sort of our conventions and making them the special place that they are, just thank you so much. We have a wonderful board game community in Melbourne, and it's just been a great year.
And thank you to everybody who's been coming up to Chris and I at our events and saying, hey, we listened to the podcast and we love it, and we've got this idea for you or that idea for you. We love getting your feedback. It's really exciting for both of us that, you know, so many people are actually listening, because we started this really just as, you know, oh, look, there's this little extra thing that we can do with Melbourne Meeples, and another avenue that we can talk about one of our favourite things in the world, board games. But the fact that we've had so many people come up and say, oh, we love listening to the podcast because we found, you know, we learned about this or we learned about that. It's really heartwarming to know that just something that Chris and I do because we find it super fun, you're all enjoying as well. So thank you so much. We super appreciate the support. I think we really should give a big shout out as well to the people that support Melbourne Meeples in general. You know, so those of us that, or those people who are members, thank you so much to our members. We could not do this without you. To all the different vendors who come along to MeepleCon, who made the Melbourne board game market so incredibly successful, you know, the people that are donating to the raffle, the people who are donating to our board game library. You know, we can shout out so many different vendors. So Mind Games, that's been there pretty much from the start. Turn Order Games, very new store in Noble Park. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go check them out. They've been so supportive of us. Grandeur Games, new board game store that's opened up in Moonee Ponds, and we've got Gameway, who've been at so many of our events and supplied their beautiful tables for us. Purple Meeple Games, you know, who are always there to donate games to the raffle for us. Cardtastic, Melora Day Dice, Shani bringing her absolutely beautiful dice for us to MeepleCon. It was the second this year that she was there, and just everybody who's come along and made all of our events so amazingly fantastic. VR Distribution, who also have been really, really fantastic. I think you should talk about the haul, Chris, that they gave us for MeepleCon. That was amazing.
So with that, VR Distribution not only donated an absolutely massive haul for the raffle, and I think that kind of, looking at some of the prize things that were up there had a huge impact on the amount of money that we raised for Beyond Blue at MeepleCon, which was, it was our biggest haul yet.
$1,500.
$1,500
was insane.
It's just, for a one-day raffle, that's pretty damn good. And that will make a difference to people's lives. We did that. They also supported a bunch of our Learn to Plays and the tournaments, in particular the Ticket to Ride tournament that we ran on a Sunday. So again, that's probably been one of the biggest and best tournaments that we've run at MeepleCon, with some of the best prizes. And we couldn't have done that without the amazing support of the team from VR Distribution. So that's been phenomenal as well. I mean, it's just been a great year. And I think last and definitely not least, it's really important to give a shout out to those that are on a Melbourne Meeples organising committee. So for any of you that do, you're listening, and you also live in Melbourne, you're also part of our community, and you come to our events, whether it's the weekly events, the general ones, or whether it's the big events. These are only possible because we've got a team of people who dedicate a whole bunch of their time outside of their normal day jobs in order to getting them to work. We are an incorporated non-profit organisation, which allows us to run events in a way that you otherwise couldn't, but it comes with that a whole bunch of additional work and stuff we have to do, and due diligence, quite rightly, to be able to have that status. So that work is largely led by a very, very busy and very, very hardworking committee. And outside of Jen and myself, so let's call out sort of Matt, our founder, Tamara, Melissa, Francois, and Sonica for the amazing work they've done this year, and some of the fabulous volunteers we've had, like Rod, Stewart, and Michael, who have just made a massive difference to how our events have run throughout the year. It's been phenomenal, and I think for the amount of you as members as well, who turn up at the end of MeepleCon and they go, "Hey, we've just come out of 3 days exhausting gaming, but do you want a hand? Do you want to help with something? Do you want to help pack up?" Every single one of you that comes up and does that, and makes that life a little bit easier and is part of the team. And it makes these things doable. But some of the things that have happened this year just would not have been possible without a lot of hard work from everyone. So, a big shout out to all for the team here. We've put a lot of work in, and what makes it special is when we put on an event and you will have a fantastic time playing board games. And that's what it's about. So take care.
We love doing this for all of you. And you know what as well? Little shout out to Rod and Joe, because without the support of our beautiful partners, this also wouldn't be possible. Because the amount of time that the two of us, I know, put into this as well, it does take away a bit from our family time, but they are there always, the two of them, being so supportive and making sure that we can do the things that we need to do. So big shout out to Rod and Joe for being beautiful, supportive partners. It's wonderful to have both of you. I love Joe. I'm keeping Joe. Yeah, she's the most beautiful person. If you've never had the opportunity to play a board game with Joe, come to one of our events and do, because she's just the most sweet, gorgeous, awesome soul. And most people have met Rod if you've been to one of our events, because he's always there. Joe is there a lot of the time, but she also has other stuff going on. So if you do get the chance, play with her. She's fabulous. But yeah, huge shout out to the whole community. Thank you so much for being so supportive over the last 12 months. And we can't wait to bring this all back to you next year.
This is the Friendly Meeples Lounge for 2023 signing off, and we will see you in 2024. Have a fantastic new year.
Bye, everyone.